Hello, thank you for joining us tonight. This is Amanda, the host of Activist Hour for 92 County Strategy. 92 County Strategy, as you all know, hopefully is a political action committee. We survive off volunteer donations and volunteer services. So please, by all means, go to the website and make a donation today. $3, $2, couch pennies, I'll take them. I don't even care. So tonight we are going to be going over the position of school board. And we want to talk about campaigning for that position, good information to know, where to get information, and then what it's like to be a community leader in that position. So tonight, joining us, we are lucky enough to have a newly elected school board member, and his name is Jeff, and I'm going to butcher this, Barranco?
Barranco.
Barranco. Okay, Jeff Barranco, I apologize.
No,
and so we have Jeff with us tonight, and he's going to tell you a little bit about himself, and then we're going to get right into it. So, Jeff, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate you being here tonight. And if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your life outside of your elected position, and then why you decided to get involved in the school board.
Sure, absolutely. So there's some information on the PowerPoint slides, but basically, I was recently here, July 24th. I was appointed to fill a vacant position as an at-large seat on our school board with Anderson Community Schools. A little bit about myself. I'm an Eagle Scout. I'm a veteran. I'm a federal employee, but I'm also a parent of 3 young kids. And one who's going to be an incoming freshman or is a freshman now. He just started last week. And 2 young girls who are going to be entering the school system here in the next 2/3 years. So really, it made sense from that standpoint. I've got 3 kids that are going to be in the schools here shortly. There's an opportunity that came up. One of the people on our school board, for personal reasons, stepped down. There's a 1.5 years left on their, seat. And there was, a public announcement for anyone that wanted to submit, kind of an application or a letter of intent to fill that seat. So I had already actually thought about running next year in 2018. So it really made sense. I'd start doing some background information on what it entailed. I don't come from an education background. So, I put a lot of research in just to get that basic knowledge of what this position really entailed. Let's see. So that's a little bit about myself. I'll move on into kind of, how I got the position that I'm in right now. So like I said, there was a public kind of, announcement that, the board was seeking applicants to fill this. I submitted a letter of intent, which basically had, kind of my resume, why I might want to join, kind of a cover letter, etc.
Right.
I think there was maybe 11 people that did that. They kind of narrowed the pool down, and then they decided to interview us. So it was a public interview. And I'm kind of moving ahead into the next step on the campaigning part, because that's really, there's 2 different things. You can be appointed to school board, or you can be elected to the school board. And so how I became a member was I was appointed out of a vacancy. So there was a need to fill it.
Right.
And so what they did is they publicly interviewed the pool of applicants that they chose. I think there was 4 of us, and they asked us questions in a public format. And then, I think 2 weeks later, they had a special board meeting, and they, voted on who they wanted to select. And I happened to be that person. And I'm really grateful for that, because, just for all the reasons, that I stated, my passion is that because of my 3 young kids, and because I really want to help the community. So that's really one way to do that. Now, let's talk about, if you're in that position where you want to file a letter of intent and there's a vacancy and you want to have a good chance of getting that, how do you go about doing that? I would say to anyone that was in that position, do your research, because I don't come from an education background. I've never done any kind of political position before. And I really don't know a lot about, or I didn't know a lot about kind of the school board itself or the other corporation. So what did I do? I did some research, and I'm talking about like maybe an hour or 2 at a time over a span of a week. I looked at the website that they had, because every time a board meets, they have minutes, they have agendas, they may have reports that are filed from different entities of the corporation. Look at those.
Right.
That's going to tell you, the things that are going on in the school district. What are the concerns? What are they seeing? So there was some really interesting reports that I saw that gave me insight on kind of the overall health and situation of the school district. And just from terminology, I may use school district, school corporation. Those are interchangeable.
Right.
Because officially we're a corporation, but a lot of people talk about school district. So
Right.
I would do your research, because you're going to learn a lot about, what's important to the school district, what's important or could be important as a board member really quickly. The other thing as far as research is there'll be some links later in the presentation. Just Google is a great resource for anything.
Right.
And school board is no different with that. I found a lot of information specific to finances, et cetera, that helped. I don't want to skip ahead, so please interrupt me if I've gone too far. So the other area that you become a school board member, you can become elected, just like any other political position.
Right.
So how do you go about doing that? It's a little bit different, because school board members, pretty much across the board nationally, they're not a partisan position. What do I mean by that? They're not. You don't say I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican or Libertarian, et cetera, and I'm running for school board. That doesn't happen with the school board positions. They're nonpartisan, so you're not really tied to any kind of political party when you run. That's not to say there's no politics involved. It's just saying you're not saying, vote for me, I'm a D or I'm an R or whatever.
Right.
There's really not a lot of that involved.
Well, and as it should be, it's about the kids. It's about the school in the future. It's not about the party. So
exactly. And so because of that, there's no primary. So, a lot of things, we see, okay, like here in Indiana, we have a primary in May, and then we have the general election in November. Well, you skip that May vote. There is no primary. There's just, you're on the general ballot in November, and that's when you would get elected. So talk about that process. So 2018 in November, anyone that's interested or files candidacy will be put on the November ballot. Because it's different, there's different rules and dates involved. So I think late July of next year is the first time that you can file a candidacy for school board for the 2018 election. So again, it is a lot different. You hear people that may file candidacy or say, I'm running for XYZ like a year and a half in advance. That's not really the case in the school board. Just maybe it's because it's maybe a lower profile. And by all means, don't take that to mean that it's less important, because there's a lot going on in the school board. Trust me.
Right.
So, from a timeline perspective, less than 6 months. Okay. I think the first time you can file is in late July of 2018. Elections in November. So, there's 5-6 months right there. And maybe generally people will say they're running for school board maybe in May or June. So, you're looking like a 6-month window. So again, how do you become elected to school board? Say, I know how to file, I know when the election is. How would I actually win a seat? Well, I don't have any personal experience in that, but I can say this is how I'm going to do it. Again, I would say do your research. Again, see kind of the things I mentioned previously. Look at board minutes, reports, know what your district demographics are. For instance, I'm in Anderson, and so we have a specific demographic here, and I kind of know what that is. And I'm learning a little bit more as I go. So know kind of your community, because that's going to have different issues in each different school district. For example, one of the things that I mentioned when I was interviewed, I talked about the free and reduced school lunch program. And pretty much every school district has some element of that, because that's a national or a federal program.
Right.
But here in Anderson, we have a pretty high percentage of students that are on that program. It's 80% throughout our district.
Wow.
I think that's a pretty high number. And so
That's
that
very
actually
high.
plays into, decisions that the board may need to make, or, it's a deciding factor in some things. And if we have time, we can talk about some of that a little bit later. So, know about your district, know about the demographics, the makeup. Do you have a strong economy where you're at, or is it weak, et cetera. So know those things. Again, there's no primary involved, so there's not, a year-long drawn-out process of campaigning. Have an idea of what the issues are. For us, actually for probably a lot of school boards, it's probably going to come down to money, and there's some things that factor into that, mainly because of how the state has changed funding models for school districts. Okay, who are your voters? We have maybe roughly 50,000 registered voters, give or take, kind of in our school district area. But as with any kind of election, not all those people come to vote, come May or November, et cetera. So have an idea of the group of people that are generally always voting in an election. And that's going to be a smaller amount. For instance, I say we have roughly 50,000 registered voters, but we know, and just doing research, that there's about 17,000 people that will vote in any given election. That's your target population right there. So who are those people and how do I find them? Okay.
Right.
And then, if you know that roughly 17,000 people are going to vote in a November election on any given, election cycle, how many of those votes do you need to win? What's your win number? And that kind of depends on, how many people, you're running against. So, for example, in the school board, your district is probably set up in different, it's broken up differently. So there's probably a couple of districts inside. So for example, our school district, we have a south, a central, and I believe an east district. I don't know. We're missing one of them. I don't know why we don't have one of the points of the compass. I'm not really sure about that. And then we have an at-large seat. Okay. So, figure out where you fall into play in one of those districts. So in other words, you're either going to run for an at-large seat. In other words, you're going to encompass the entire district, or because of where you live, where you reside, you fall in one of those other, kind of groups. Are you in the South District, the Central District, et cetera? They usually have maps to that either on the school board website or on your county election board, et cetera. So if you need to find that information, you can Google that as well.
Okay.
So let's see. So we talked about how you could be appointed. We've talked about kind of how you'd be elected. So that's really how you would become a school board member. Now, what do they do?
I do want to interject. I want to interject one thing.
Sure.
So with campaigning, last year, a couple of different times, I worked the polls. I was also a poll watcher and a vote protector. So in May, I worked the polls, and then later on in the year, in November, when it was time for the school board elections, I actually was able to drive around, and I went and checked on all the polls in the county. And one thing that I noticed consistently is that people just weren't voting for school board at all because they didn't know any of them, and they didn't want to make a poor choice for the kids. So I have to say one of the most important things is getting yourself out there. It may seem like it's a small position, but that door knocking is just as important for school board as it is for any other office.
That's a very good point. And, let me kind of expound upon that. In any given election, whether it's a presidential cycle or a non-presidential cycle, you're going to have a number of positions that, you can vote on. And typically what they say is kind of the lower ballot positions get less and less votes, outstanding, because people, for whatever reason, people just get tired of looking at all the options, or they just, it's not a position they're interested in or whatever. School board,
we have straight ballot here. So with school board being a non-partisan position, a straight ballot vote doesn't touch it. So people that just check their straight ballot and don't flip their ballot over, they don't even know that that's there.
That's another valid point. And so, you know, what the thing you kind of fight on kind of the school board or kind of lower ballot positions is that you want to make sure people actually get to you and check a box or fill it in, et cetera.
Right.
You know, and that's the point. You know, to do that, you've got to get your name out there, like you said. You've got to knock on doors. You've got to go to community meetings. You've got to, you know, however you do it, people have to know you're there to vote for you. They have to know your name. Because, yeah, they're not, if they don't know the name recognition is a lot in campaigning. Or if it's a hot button issue that you can kind of, you know, have the community buy in on, that's how they vote for you. So that's a very good point.
All right. So those are all really great information. So just a quick recap if you're just joining us. The two ways to get onto school board are by filling a vacancy or campaigning and getting the win on a November ballot. So there we are. And moving on, we're going to go ahead and the wrong one here. So now, like you were beginning to say, so that's how you get on school board. Now, what does the school board do? So if you're joining us online, you can see we do have a PowerPoint going that has a lot of this information listed, so you can refer to that at any point. So Jeff, what does a school board member do?
Sure, absolutely. So, you know, if you can kind of picture the school board in terms of a business, because really, at least it's a very good way to look at it. Here in Anderson, we have about a $75 million annual budget. So think of that in terms of a $75 million business or corporation. The school board members or board of trustees, however term that you use, think of them like a board of directors, okay? Individually, any one of those members, or like myself, we have zero authority individually. We can't make policy or obligate the school district individually. As a board, we can come together and say, yes, this is a policy we want to set, or here's what we want to do with our funding, et cetera, from budgetary purposes, but individually we can do nothing. Now, in that aspect, if you think of the school board as kind of the board of directors, the superintendent would be kind of like the CEO. They do the day-to-day operations and running of the actual school district. So the superintendent with their administrative staff is actually running the schools day-to-day and keeping, you know, the lights on, et cetera, and teachers happy, stuff like that. So if you're in a board of directors type of setup, what you're doing is you're really overseeing everything that's going on. And the two biggest things that really I think a school board has an obligation to do is, one, look at budgetary concerns or issues or set the budget, and we actually vote on the budget. For instance, in our school district, we actually had a board meeting on Tuesday, and we held our public hearing about our budget for 2018. So again, next month we'll actually hold a vote on that budget, because we have to publicly announce it. Here's our budget. Here's a hearing. Are there any questions, et cetera, concerns from the public? Right. And so next month in September, we'll actually do a vote on the 2018 budget. The other area is making policy. So that could be on anything. It could be on, oh goodness, pretty much anything that, you know, any policy that may affect kind of the students, the staff, the facilities, et cetera. The school board of trustees can set those, can change them, can look at them, et cetera. So those are really the two biggest areas that I can think of at the moment that are an obligation or duty of school board. So kind of going down the lines, you know, what might they do? We talked about kind of the budget thing, and specifically, you know, a lot has happened in the last, say, I don't know, not 10 years, but really since 2009, with the state changing how they fund the school boards. A lot of things have happened with budgets across Indiana. So the money part is a big ticket item for a lot of school districts across the state. So you'll see maybe some news about, say, from Muncie, where the state's kind of taken over that school district. Some of that is because of decisions that weren't made due to some funding changes. You hear news about in Indianapolis and IPS where they're closing certain high schools or other schools. that's
Yeah, we lost an elementary school here. This is the second year now. We've not had it. And now because our enrollment was down and we were getting
right.
less money per student, and now our enrollment is up and we're bigger than we were the last 2 years, and now our class sizes are maxing out.
Right. And so that's directly impacted by the money the school board is getting, or the district is getting, from the state and from their local municipalities as far as taxing. So,
right.
for example, roughly 2/3 of our budget comes from the general fund or the state, and that is directly tied by school enrollment. And so just a quick number, for every student you have enrolled in your school district, you'll get about $5,000. We'll say $5,000 to $6,000. It kind of changes or fluctuates, but that's a pretty solid number. So if you get an extra 100 students in a year, that's a big impact. Or if you lose 100 students, that's also a big impact on your finances. So so we have to think about that, because we're looking at the budget for 2018 right now, and kind of having to figure out what has our enrollment been, what will we think it will be, and make those decisions. So some of the other things that the board does that may not be necessarily on a position description is we collaborate with the teachers union. So AFT, at least is a union here, American Federation of Teachers, I believe. So we work with them, kind of collaborate with them on things. We work with the superintendent and the administrative staff here. So if you kind of think of it like a three-pronged chair, those are the three, spokes per se that kind of work together on any given day-to-day issue, or just think this is, making everything run smoothly.
Right.
Other things, really a school board member, because you're kind of in that board of director type of position, you really need to champion the school district, I think, to the greater community. Because there might be, and I've got a good example, because I met with one of the local principals here, and just kind of a school visit. We looked at some things, just wanted to touch base. Well, they have a couple initiatives and programs that they're doing at this specific school that are really exciting, and that aren't necessarily, say, programmatic or school oriented as far as education, but they're beneficial to the students and the families. And let me talk about that for just a moment. In this school, what the teachers and staff have been able to do is partner with a local food bank, and also other external entities that are willing to volunteer time and money to really help the students as far as nutritional needs. I mentioned earlier, specific to our area, that we have a large population of kids that are on a free or reduced lunch program. Well, the way that you qualify for that program is by family income. So if you're a SNAP beneficiary, or kind of a Medicaid beneficiary, it usually is tied to poverty, income. Well, if that's the indicator, or that's, here's a lot of our students are in this, you can kind of, extrapolate, well, the family life, there's not a lot of money there to feed the kids and have extra, food, etc. So there's a need there in the community. And what these individuals have been able to do is kind of partner with external entities to bring that solution to the families here at that school. So that's not necessarily a board issue or concern, because it's not a policy issue, it's not a budgetary issue, but it's something that we as a board can champion and say, look, this is a program that works. This is helping families, the students there. We want to spread that to the community, let people know about it, and maybe we can duplicate it elsewhere in one of our other facilities. So that's a good example where, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, well, and I was going to compound on that. Here locally, a very similar type of thinking. The schools noticed that because of, unfortunately, I can't say why, but around here we have very bad opioid addiction. We have very high incarceration rate in our county. I'm in Dearborn. We were on the New York Times last year for our incarceration rate. And so we have a lot of children that are being raised by their grandparents. And we have implemented a lot of newer technologies recently. Our middle school just got Chromebooks. They're using Power School accounts. You can pay for lunch online and things like that. And so our school is actually holding a series of workshops for grandparent families over the course of the year to help keep them updated and keep them up on the technology and see how to keep up with the kids that they're now having to basically kind of start over with the schooling process. So that there again, it's not necessarily directly related to education, but it is directly related to making sure that the child is having a well-rounded education experience.
Yep,
and so
absolutely.
that's a really great thing to point out, is that, you know, the school board has the ability, like you said, to be a champion for the district and really do things that help the community, because they're there, you know, on the front lines seeing what our youth are dealing with. So that's something that I don't think a lot of people take into consideration. They get stuck on the budget, they get stuck on the programs and the extracurriculars and stuff like that. And those things fall through the cracks. For instance, this evening, our school board brought up the fact that they're looking into the budget next year to try and cut book fees or even remove them completely for parents. And that's something that would be huge for a lot of people around here.
Right.
So, you know, those are things that they can do that really help lift the burden to reduce some of the stress at home that may make it easier for the child to succeed at school.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I think it really boils down to overall child development. I mean, if you have a student or that's in a family environment and for whatever reason can't provide, adequate nutrition or a backpack or school supplies, etc., you can kind of throw away let's focus on, reading, writing, and arithmetic today, don't worry about that. Fill the basic need first, then you can worry about, all right, let's look at the reading scores and the math scores, because, you got to take care of the first one, before you can really worry about, the other part. And I think that's where the staff at this school has noticed that and said, you know what, the need is too great. We're not going to worry about some things. We're going to get this right first, and then we can develop the other.
I mean, it all goes back, and I'm a sucker for the memes, on the internet. And it all goes back to one I saw, and it was a story about a little boy, and it was something about, I forgot a pencil or something. And it goes through all these things he had to do to even get in the classroom, like get himself up, get his little sibling ready, get them both ready, ride 2 different buses or something. Like it was a hellacious morning even to get into the classroom. And then he got kicked out of class or something for not having a pencil.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it just encompasses all of that we just talked about. It's the whole well-being of the child that really has to be taken into consideration when you're on the school board. So know that if you're listening, you're out there and you're thinking about running for school board, take those things into consideration and take them back to where you are and help your school board do better. So.
And when I was interviewed, I don't know, middle of July or whatever, one of the questions had to deal with that, because in my 5-minute kind of presentation to the school board interview, I mentioned a lot of statistics. I mentioned our financial situation. I mentioned, the 80% free reduced lunch, et cetera. And, one of the things that they said was, one of the comments or questions I got back was really boiled down to, okay, well, knowing the financial situation we're in, what are your thoughts on kind of, what do we do with that? What does that tell you, et cetera? And my answer to that was, I said, look, I've got a finance degree. I understand numbers as far as if you give me a financial report, it can make sense to me and it tells a story. And the story for us right now is that, there's not a lot of money out there for us to just spend on just random items. We have a tight budget based upon, financing. However, given that scenario, I would, strongly say that you cannot have a bottom line mentality or an accounting CPA mentality when you're dealing with programs or issues that are going to affect kids in these schools, because, you cannot make any individual a bottom line number. There's a whole lot more involved with that. So,
Absolutely.
that's kind of my comment. And I think that's, we're kind of going into the issues. The issue for us where we're at in Anderson, in our corporation, is that, we're economically depressed. I don't think anybody would argue the fact. If you've got 80% of your students on free and reduced lunch, that's an issue. What we're trying to do is solutions to that issue that, can improve upon child development.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, a lot of people don't realize how you were saying that a certain portion of the funding comes from property taxes and things. That when you have 80% of your school on free or reduced lunch, guaranteed the property taxes and stuff coming in to that school are much, much lower.
Absolutely.
You're much lower revenue.
Absolutely. And I'm looking at where we are time-wise, so we're going to be able to talk about some of that. I'm kind of excited. Again, like I said, I have a finance background. I like to do resurch, so I'm going to geek out a little bit.
That's wonderful.
So I'm going to flip
let's get on to where now I'm here, and you were nice enough. When we do these, a lot of times we'll put together a PowerPoint, but I wanted Jeff, because he had done so much research, to really put himself into this. So he's kind of put this one together for us. So I commend you for that. It looks great. And here we're looking at references, and I would like to know a little bit more about these places that you're directing people to, and maybe what kind of information they can find there.
Sure, absolutely. So on the PowerPoint slide that has the references, if you click on any one of those are links to either articles or websites. So the first one says Article on Basics of Indiana Education. This was one, again, I just Googled it. I said, Indiana public schools, etc. I don't remember exactly what I searched by, but I was able to find kind of an education website, and they broke it down very simple, and it's all focused on Indiana. They do a couple different states, but this link is specific to Indiana. And there's probably 10 or 12 different articles about different aspects
this is
of
great.
the school board. For instance, there's an article about what are charter schools, how the basics of how Indiana schools are funded, etc. I think the articles were originally written in like 2014 or 2015, but what they've done is they've gone back and updated them. So there were some minor updates that they made. So there's really good relevant information there. So I would highly recommend, if you especially if you don't come from an education background like I don't, if you've never done school board and you're interested and you're in Indiana, this is a great resource for you. That's the first place I would go. The second article is kind of highlighting specific to Indiana public school funding. I think it talks about, the impact of vouchers or charter schools, et cetera, and the state's change in how they funded schools. It's just a real quick, synopsis about how the funding is here in Indiana. The third link is a governmental link. So it's actually a state government page. It's the Department of Local Government Finance. There's a lot of technical stuff there. Now, the link I gave you is specific to schools, because there's a lot of reports, a lot of information that is put out. I mean, it's a government entity. There's a lot of stuff out there. But what that specific entity does is they report to the school districts, and the school districts report to it in terms of, hey, next year, here's what we're expecting your general fund amount to be. So it's a entity that really works with the school districts in terms of budgeting, planning, etc. They do reports as far as impacts of any changes in state law, calculation to how much you might get per student, etc., and funding. So there's a lot of good information there, but it's a little bit more technical. So you can get kind of boring, I'll be honest. The last
but it's good information to have if you're going to run for school board.
Absolutely. So that's kind of more the nitty gritty when you're getting really into the details. So hit the first two articles, first. The last two links are just kind of good information, because if you're going to be a board member, there's some information that is from the National School Board Association. So they represent all of the school districts across the country. So there could be some good information and context there. And the last one is the Indiana School Board Association, the ISBA. So they kind of are the state entity that helps educate, lobby, or help with policy. for all the different, school districts here in the state. I think there's 90 something of them. I don't know the exact number, but that sounds about right. So those are some of the references. Again, that's not exhaustive. There's a ton of information out there. So the other one I would say is whatever county that you're in, look at the county's treasurer webpage and look at your tax information. Because what I'll do, if Amanda doesn't have any other items, let me talk about how school boards are funded.
Okay.
In 2009, the state changed had a major change on how school boards are funded, where generally speaking, school boards are funded by different funds. And, we'll say there's a general fund, there is maybe a capital projects fund, a transportation fund, a debt fund. It kind of depends on the makeup of your area. But in general, sorry to use that word a lot, all of those funds initially were kind of funded, or the revenue was done by local taxes. So in other words, if you own a home, you pay taxes on your home, you pay property tax. Or if you're a business, right, you're paying property tax for your location. Well, schools get a portion of the pie as far as some of those taxes. What the state did in 2009 is they really changed how schools got money by saying that general fund, instead of it being tied to, say, a tax levy locally, it's solely going to come from your student enrollment. In other words, Anderson Schools, you've got 7,000 students enrolled. We're going to pay you 7,000 times X. And that's what you're going to get. You don't get any more, you don't get any less. So for us, that amounts to about maybe $52, $53 million a year. That's 2/3 of our annual budget. That's what we get in revenue. Now those other funds, and that'll be the same across the board, no matter what county you're in. Your general fund is strictly set by the state, and you can get that information from that Department of Local Government Finance. They publish that information. And incidentally, that number is set by student enrollment as of September 15th. So we're in August. Middle of next month, we'll have a number of what our student enrollment is. That's what the state is going to set our funding for the next year. Okay, so September 15th, whatever your student enrollment is how the state is going to fund you in 2018. Okay, now the rest of everything, maybe the other 1/3 of our revenue, at least for us and probably for other school districts, is coming from those local tax levies, your property taxes on homes and etc. For us, we've got a couple different other funds that we use to pay off certain things. So we've got a capital projects fund. That's really, fixing windows, fixing doors, the buildings, etc. Right. Transportation fund. That's, our buses, buying new buses, replacement costs, etc. We have a debt fund, and then I think we have a pension offset fund. I mean, that's kind of, there's a couple different things. All of those funds the revenue for them comes from local tax levies, from those property taxes. Now, how do those get impacted? And this is a key thing to look at if you're really serious about the school board. First of all, the reason why I would say go to that, your county treasurer's website is you can get an idea of what the assessed value is for your school district, because they'll break it down by municipality. They'll say city, county, township, and they'll say school board. For us, there's a couple different school boards within our county. So it'll say Anderson Community Schools Corporation, and it'll say, here's everything for this school district. Here's what you get. Here's the assessed value of all the property, etc. And they'll have a breakdown. So it's just good to know. But the other reason I say, why you might want to go there is because what's important in all those other funds, say 1/3 of what our revenue is annually, is how much of our taxes are actually collected. So let's say you have a pool of $100. This is how much you could actually get. If your tax collection rate is only 60%, that means there's $40 of revenue that you're losing every year, that you're just not getting, that you're entitled to as a school, but you're just not getting for whatever reason. And there's a couple things that could affect that. So that's good to know. For us, our tax collection rate is only like 67%. So we're losing money we're not really losing money. We're just not getting all of the money that we could actually get as revenue. So that affects us financially. And I'm pretty sure there are a lot of other school districts that have either something similar or they're having another issue with that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm going to look a little more into that and find out, because I know around here there's been some issues with some businesses not paying pretty large chunks of money and it being let go for a good amount of time. That's something that I'm going to have to start looking into.
Now, the one thing I would also, there's two things that really kind of affect that number, and I'm going to say circuit breaker and I'm going to say TIF. Now, what is a circuit breaker? Well, again in 2009 and 2012, I think the state legislature, and again, good or bad, they decided to kind of lessen the taxes that municipalities can get as far as revenue by increasing the circuit breaker. And what do I mean by that? What is a circuit breaker? So, okay, let's say you have a home and it's valued at $100,000. And so that's the assessed value of your property that can be taxed.
Okay.
What a circuit breaker does, it says no matter what your tax levy is, you can only pay out a maximum amount of X in taxes. Let's say it's 3%. So your assessed value on your home is $100,000. And they say your circuit breaker is 3%. So the max amount of money that you can pay out in taxes is $3,000. Well, what the state did is they lowered that number to only 1%. So instead of a school board receiving, say, or all the big pie being $3,000, it's now only $1,000. That's money coming from city, county, school board revenue. Okay, so that had a huge impact and still has a huge impact to all these municipal government entities.
I mean, you cut it by 2/3. There's no way that wouldn't have a huge impact.
Exactly. Now there's a scale. I use 3%, and that's really I think where it was previously. But like businesses have a certain percentage, regular residential has a certain percentage, et cetera. And I think farmland has a different one, but it's 1% for home. But in essence, they cut it by 2/3. So that's a huge number. For us in Anderson, we know that number. And again, if you go to the Department of Local Government Finance, they'll tell you exactly what the impact is per corporation, per county, et cetera. Per year in Anderson for us, that's an $8.8 million hit. That's money that we wouldn't normally or were getting, but now we're not. That's more than 10% of our yearly budget.
Wow.
Yeah. So again, finances, dollars is a big deal for school corporations because it affects the money you have to fix school facilities, to pay teachers, and an issue that we may talk about is how do you actually raise money for your school board when you need to? It means you're going to have to do a referendum. It means voters are going to have to vote on whether they want to raise their taxes or allow school boards to raise money separately from what they would normally get on a yearly revenue basis. And because of, for instance, for us, we are looking at that case. So if we didn't have this circuit breaker where we're losing $8 million a year in revenue, we wouldn't have to talk about maybe doing a referendum because we'd have the money we needed to fix roofs on schools, to have programs that we need to have. So, actions have consequences. Now, the other term I mentioned is TIF. That stands for Tax Incremental Financing. And you can do a Google search on it. There's a couple articles out there. There's a lot of reports. What that does is basically the state, again, I go back to the state legislature. The state legislature is huge in terms of the effect it has on, municipal governments and school corporations. What they did is they, and this is probably a number of years ago, they gave a lot of power to local governments, say city, county, in using TIF districts, tax increment financing, to spur growth for business, for economic development. So how that works, just in a real quick synopsis, a mayor or a county can say, you know what, we're going to allot this area within the city or the county, and we're going to say this is going to be a TIF district. Once they do that, they do that because they want to have businesses come in, they want to spur growth. It may be a blighted area, etc. What happens is, let's say you have an abandoned home. Well, if it's abandoned, you know you're not getting any tax revenue from it because there's no one there. There's no one living there. You're not getting any money from it. If they tear it down and someone builds a new house there, you have tax money on the rolls. Well, what happens is if it's in a TIF district, that new tax revenue that you're getting, no one gets it. The school board doesn't get it. It's allotted for, economic development later. In other words, it's an incentive for that business to come in and build something to create more value or assessed value. But the tax revenue that's received from it doesn't go to the school board or to the local government. That's kind of an easy way to put it. There's a lot of information, and that tells a little bit more. You can do a Google search and come up with a wiki page that tells you a little bit more exactly what it is. But in essence, it affects us financially. It's a loss of revenue. And again, there's reports, I think, on the Department of Local Government that will talk about that impact as well. Or you can look at your county treasurer's website. They'll actually say in the school board corporation that you're looking up what the TIF value is, and they have a separate line item, so you can see what the impact is of a TIF district if you have one. For us here in Anderson, it's a little over $2 million a year, that we're losing because of that, and that's every year for like the last 30 years, I think. It obviously fluctuates per year, but really consistently, probably for the last 5, it's been $2 million a year. So I've already talked about we're losing over $8 million a year because of a circuit breaker. We're losing $2 million a year because of this TIF district issue, and the way the state funds school boards with the general fund, we're only allotted a certain amount of funds. So you can see where all these things add up. So every year, at least in our district, we have about $10 or $11 million that we have to figure out how to make up. And I'm pretty sure all of the other school districts around the state have a similar issue. It's just how have they done that? What has been the impact to them? And what decisions did they make in, say, 2010, 2012 to really set themselves up for success? Example, Anderson, what they did, again, I wasn't on the board then, I didn't even live in Anderson here at that time, is what they did is they looked at their facilities, they looked at their enrollment, and they consolidated some of their schools. They also looked at their payroll. They let 200 teachers go because they knew they were going to get hit with all this, back to back to back to back. They made some
We've done that too.
Decisions. I'm sorry, go ahead.
We've done that too. About 8 years ago, we were operating in the red, and we were at risk of the state coming in, and they laid off a bunch of teachers. And then a couple of years ago, they shut a school, and we're in the positive again. So we're not at risk of a takeover, but it's just like you said, with all the financing and the way the legislature has changed things, it's the same all over.
Exactly. So, a lot of tough decisions were made, but because they were made and, there were some good people in place at that time to make those tough decisions. Right now, even with those, that $10 million that we're losing every year, we're actually in an okay position. Now, yes, we could totally use funds if we had extra funds, but we're not in a situation where, we're $10 million in the hole right now, and we're trying to figure out how we're going to pay our teachers, months from now. We're not in that situation at all. Now, I'm going to use Muncie schools as an example, but I really don't know a lot. I just know that I don't think they made similar decisions, and the reason why they're having a takeover is because they may not have made the best financial decisions in the last 8 years to set them up for success. There's a lot more than going on there, but just if you kind of look at the quick, maybe synopsis, some tough decisions probably weren't made in 2010 to 2012 that should have been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It's hard to look and look at your parents and tell them, hey, we have to kind of boost class sizes, and we're sorry.
Absolutely.
It's a difficult thing to do because class sizes are already way too big, but it's either a state-run school or an extra teacher's aide.
Yep. And, maybe another point, I know we're kind of getting close to it, but school boards are facing the issue now where they didn't maybe 20 years ago, or maybe not even as much 10 years ago, families have educational choice that they didn't have 10 or 20 years ago. And what do I mean by that? A family can do charter schools. They can get a voucher to go to any school they want to, basically. There are online school settings that they can go to. There are, there's just so much educational choice that can take a child out of public school system. And when that happens, that public school system loses funding for that child. So to some standpoint, school boards have to be kind of marketing themselves. They have to have more of a business viewpoint, because they really are fighting for those kids, So you have to look at what programs do we have that makes us different than those other institutions that people would want to come here for.
I'm so happy to hear you say that. When I went to the school board meeting 2 years ago, when it was the parent comment night about shutting down one of the elementary schools, that was what I said. Was what programs are you doing to bring kids in? Have you partnered with anybody? Are you doing STEAM or STEM programs? Are you adding technologies? What are you doing to be marketable to parents? Because here in Dearborn County, you not necessarily leave the public school system, but there is school choice even within the public school system, because they made it a couple of years ago to where you can choose to go to any school within the county. And there's no tuition. There's no bus service. You have to get your kid there. But as long as you live within the county, you can take your kid to any one of the 3 school districts.
Right.
So,
that's
additional school choice.
Right, exactly. So, and we have that here too. People may, there's a couple local school districts that are close enough that families could say, you know what, for whatever reason, I don't want my kid to go to this school. I'm gonna drive him back and forth to this school district because it's close enough. And that's definitely a choice. And that's, that's where you have to look at from a product standpoint. Again, kind of the business side. Do we have a product that makes sense, that's good, and that we're delivering to families that they want to come here? As a side note, I'm going to kind of, maybe wave a flag here for Anderson Schools. We're lucky in the fact that we have a regional career center. And what do I mean by that? One of our facilities, which is within our school corporation, it's called D26 Career Center, and it ties in with the high school. So I think there's like 12 or 13 different kind of vocational or career training programs that juniors and seniors can choose from, such as, dental hygienist, licensed practical nurse, welding, construction, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, these are programs to where when a high school senior graduates, they could either have a certification or have the training to where they could get a job out in the economy without ever having to go to college and actually making good money.
Right.
We have one of those campuses here in our corporation, and we actually have students from outside of our school corporation that get bussed in to come to these programs. So we're lucky in that aspect that we do have something that really is specific to us, that a charter school cannot compete with us in that, because they're usually a one-off institution, whether it be like a religious-based school or just kind of a prep academy. They're not going to have a vocational and career training center that is going to have like a 2-year training program focusing on one specific area. We do have that. And that's one of the things, at least from a school board's perspective, that we highlight and that we want to build upon.
That's fantastic. Okay, well, let's see. So we're coming up kind of on the end of our time. And there's a couple of questions I always like to ask people when we do this, because one of the things that we're trying to help people understand with 92 County Strategy is that the people that step up to do this are just normal people that felt the draw to serve their community and decided to put the time into it. So one thing that I would like to know from you is, how much time do you spend working on school board issues, or how much time do you expect to spend working on school board issues, say per month?
Okay, that's a good question, because I think it's dependent upon the individual. For me, not coming from a background in education, and because I like to do research, I'm probably spending much more time than, say, the average person on the school board.
Hmm.
And that's not, to be toot my own horn. That's not what I mean at all. It's just because I like looking stuff up and getting ideas.
I'm the same way.
Yeah. So let me break it down this way. So, okay, so we had a school board meeting on Tuesday. What we did is we meet at 5 o'clock, and that's for an executive session. So that's kind of closed doors, and we meet for an hour roughly to talk about things amongst ourselves. And that's within Indiana state regulations, we can do that. At 6 o'clock,
Right.
we have our public board meeting, and that can go from, say, 6 to 7. It could go to 6 to 8. So you're talking anywhere between 2 hours to maybe 3 hours for a typical board meeting, and that's once a month. Now,
Okay.
about a week before that, we get emailed or sent all the information that we need for that upcoming board meeting. And that could be, all the reports, the financials, stuff that we need to vote on, et cetera. And that could range between, say, 70 to 100 pages or more. So however long it would take you to look through that stuff, again, half of that is probably just previous meeting minutes that you're saying, yes, I don't have any changes. So that's kind of quick. But, you could have some questions or some things that you may need to look up, but I would say an hour or two at least to look through all that to prepare for the board meeting. You've got 2 to 3 hours for the board meeting itself. So, there's 5 hours right there for just a one monthly board meeting. Anything in between, I think, is really kind of on your own or as things come up. For instance,
Hmm.
I didn't have to go visit the school that I went to yesterday, but I wanted to, mainly because some of the programs they had there. So that was an hour out of my time. I took an extended lunch from my work to go do that. There's some research that you could do on your own time, and that's really, like I said, it's really independent on the individual, how
Okay.
passionate they are about a position or et cetera. So I
So
would
we'll
say at the
say
very
probably at least 6 or 8 hours a month, and then you could
absolutely,
go above and beyond.
exactly, that's what I would say. Yes.
Okay. So another question is it a paid position?
Yes, so I do get a stipend from the corporation, and that could vary between corporations. I don't know what other people pay, and I'm sure that people in IPS in Indianapolis probably get paid more just because of the size of the corporation. Um,
Right. Absolutely. We know that the pay, the reimbursement definitely does vary from position to position and county to county, and even just from north to south in the state. But it's something that we do like to ask so people can get a general idea, because a township trustee, you make anywhere from about $2,500 to $5,500, and sometimes a little more depending on where you are for the whole year.
got it.
So that's something that, we're kind of like, okay, well, about what does a school board member essentially make being a school board member?
Sure. Like for us, it's $2,000 a year, so they pay quarterly, so it's $500 every quarter. To put that in perspective, I know that the city council and county council get paid about $13,000 a year, but I think they have a
Okay.
little bit more involved as far as meetings that they go to.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Okay. So is there something that you have found so far that you don't, I know you just kind of got into it, but is there anything you found that you don't particularly like about the job?
Um, I don't have anything yet. Again, I think that there's different dynamics about being on school board. I think you have to understand that your role is really to kind of be the overseer in essence. And again, you don't have kind of individual authority to anything. If you can come, excuse me, if you can come into it knowing those things, I think you're going to be ahead of the game. Because again, I went to go visit a school. I told them, look, I'm just here to kind of see, let me know what your problems are, and I'll report them back to the board, because individually, I can't do anything about them. I can't say,
Right.
what, we're going to do
Exactly.
X, Y, and Z. So I think, if you come from that mindset, you'll be good. But to answer your question, there hasn't been anything that I've come across, other than the fact that I'm really surprised on how schools are funded and the impact that the state has had on them. That was quite illuminating when I did my research for when I was interviewed.
Well, and this conversation has been quite illuminating in that topic. I'm sure anyone listening and anyone that comes back and refers to this archive will definitely be happy that you joined us, and especially fresh off of campaigning for it, because you still had campaigned for it. You might not have knocked on doors and went through a ballot, but you campaigned for it. You had to put yourself out there and do the research and know what you were talking about to get it. Right. So that's, this is great information for anyone that's thinking of running. So one other thing that I always like to give people at the end of our program is some basic information for campaign finance, just because it's such a big deal. Some of the things that people need to remember is that most campaigns do require reporting. You always want to contact your county clerk and the Indiana Election Division to clarify any forms, filing dates, deadlines, anything that you have to apply to make sure that when you declare, you're declaring properly, you accept donations properly, and you're reporting properly. So always make sure, no matter what we say here, go straight to the horse's mouth and make sure you get that information correctly, because we want to make sure everybody's protected. Now, as always, you can send your emails to 92counties@gmail.com. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to get Jeff, and we will follow up. So, Jeff, I really want to thank you. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. This has just been, by far, one of my favorite sessions, just so informative, and you really put a lot of time into being prepared for this. So I really appreciate that, and I know our listeners do as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. Well, everybody, I hope you have a wonderful night. As always, Jeff, I thank you again, and we will see you back here 2 weeks, same time, same place. We will have Candace Shaw talking about social media organizing. She's with Blue Valpo, and she has been doing this for upwards of 20 years. And we hope to get some great information from her about how to use Facebook and social networking and email integrations and all the things you need to run for office in this day and age. So hope to see you next time. If you have any questions, email us, and don't forget to click that donate button. So have a great night. Be kind as always. And thanks for joining.